Travels of the Ellis Arbor is a TTRPG story set in the world of Bastion using the Vagrant Sun campaign setting. Tune in for episode 41, Travails. Surreptitiously and with expert sneakery, Newt escaped the clutches of the Denaysmere Guard with barely a drop of sweat. Few could match him in terms of slipperiness, and none could match him in terms of preparedness. He was certain they'd not foreseen the traps that he'd set at the town exterior, ensnaring his pursuance before they could even see as Newt slipped behind the tree line. Weeks of toil, research, and dark dealings had led to this. Newt had exactly what he required from the rogues of Chester's marvelous band. He knew exactly what his purpose was and where to go next. He'd have to pick up the pace, however. Surely Darian was hot on his heels, either with pistol drawn or the rest of the crew in flight. Newt's mission was essential, above all else. He must not be compromised. When he learned of the existence of the Lady of Blood and the dark pact that bound both Darian and the Ellis Arbor, Newt was confident in his resolve. The captain had hid this truth from the crew, simply to protect them. And up until the moment of Newt's betrayal, he had done so. Now, things were different. Regardless of the path forward, Darian would always, inevitably, be at odds with his crew. His alliances would be tested, and his faith in them reprised. For the Artificer, however, nothing had changed. Ever had he been a faithful comrade to the quick-fingered, silver-tongued pirate. Darian had brought him out of the squalor of his youth. He'd recognized the gifted touch that Newt had been blessed with, his love for tinkering, his heart for adventure, and the savant-like skill with Ethereum. As much as others might see Newt as nothing other than an asset to the captain of the Ellis Arbor, the Cyanide foresaw other motives. For without Darian, Edward, Carpathian, and more, he was nothing. He owed the captain this much, the very least. Returning to the moment, Newt's thoughts became transfixed on the journey ahead. He'd acquired the requisite Ethereum for his arcane rituals, and gathered information on an outpost where he could conduct them. Midas Cairn, a valley between mountain peaks, a hold full of those that society deemed too dangerous to fold into its arms. A den of thieves, brigands, mercenaries, and of rival factions. Within its hearth, nestled between the shadow of the mountain, was a chapel. One beholden to a faith they'd seen before in their travails amidst Farreach. The Order of Pleiades, an ancient elven lineage of those who worship the memory of a star from a different sky. From the readings Newt had procured, it is said that they have harnessed a number of severance rituals, able to cleave soul from body, as well as greedy patron from unwilling practitioner. It is they that have led countless lost souls on a path to redemption. With whatever art the Star of Pleiades had blessed them with, Newt was certain he could find a way to break Darian's curse. Remove the chokehold the lady had upon him. Perhaps he could even help the captain to lay his burdens of the past to rest. No more than a day's travel, he thought. The forests of Middlereach were a mix of tumble, twig, and vine, challenging to traverse for folk of medium stature. Though, for Newt, the jungles of Silas Mar were but a bump in the road to his destination. Onwards, upwards, through and between, Newt wove a path through the thickest parts of the jungle, aloft his floating, magical disc. Darkness crept into strange shadows, seemingly ebbing between cover and avoiding the sunlight. It was as if the latent energies of this forest had learned to abhor the light, able to cover themselves in a blanket of dark. His vision uninhibited by the dark, Newt found little rest stopping only briefly to collect water from a spring and to collect synthesizing catalysts from the magically blessed trees of the area. Though as he pressed on, that lingering, creeping dark began to warp the corners of his vision. It was as if the forest, living and breathing, wanted nothing more than to slow his advance. Tendrils of grey, veils of smoky haze, and the thrum of some heaving sigh made it feel as if the forest wished to swallow Newt whole. Were it not for his arcane catalyst, shining with a vibrant blue light, he thought he might be lost to its hunger. And then, as he sped through the treetops, his senses attuned to something else. The distinct sound of scattering leaves, breaking bark, and snapping twig. He hid, hoping not to have roused suspicion from the creatures within the forest. Though it was less the creatures of the forest that brought danger, as something else entirely crept through Silas Marr. Standing shoulder to shoulder, two acolytes of some magical household, clad in black robes and hemmed with gold and silver. Tall elven figures walked through the brush, holding what looked to be a chained coffin aloft. In front of the procession, another elven figure, with a polished silver wand outstretched. He waved it through the air like a rapier, cutting through the underbrush with an ephemeral sword. Between the slashing of vines and the almost militaristic rhythm of footsteps, they carved a path due east, through the deepest part of the jungle and toward the coastal edge. What was this procession? Newt thought to himself, staying low and out of sight. Almost reflexively, he spun his catalyst in his hand, casting a veil of invisibility upon himself. The elven procession seemed like a funeral march, carrying this chained black coffin in places so inhospitable. Clearly, the box held something more important than the remains of some noble. There were pathways and roads they could have taken, other magical means that would expedite such a process. The fact that they wandered in the deepest, blackest parts of Silas Marr was unnerving indeed. As his training had taught him to do, Newt's eyes turned to the leader of the pack, the silver-haired elven man, slashing with precision at the vines ahead. His garb was simple, yet refined, donning a two-piece attire of thick, woven fabric. Silver thread drew strange markings, like the seal of some noble house that Newt could not recall. His eyes were focused and determined, equally attentive to the path ahead, yet pondering some dark thought that plagued his stoic demeanor. In that moment, surveying such an odd procession, Newt saw what he had hoped not to see. Adorning the black, silver-threaded garb of the elven mage, a pocket square, proudly puffing upon his chest. A thatch of black and white squares, arranged in a loose crosshatch. It was unmistakable. This mage, this procession, and that chained coffin must be of Chester's marvelous band. That such an image could appear before Newt seemed both ominous and curious. His adventurous, enamored brain could barely stay focused on his own course, knowing that something like this couldn't be anything less than significant. Nevertheless, through every intrusive thought and curiosity flaw, Newt let the procession pass until the sounds of footsteps diminished. He dropped his arcane veil and continued on his pursuit of Midas Ken and the Order of Pleiades. Travels of the Ellis Arbor is made possible by the generous support of our subscribers, followers, and most notably, our patrons. Special thanks to new and existing patrons for our Moon, Wedge, Crown, and Hex tier subscriptions. Please subscribe, give a like or a comment, follow us on Twitter, and stay tuned for the next episode. Make sure to follow us here on YouTube, on Spotify, and on twitch.tv/Lonomy. Don't forget, Take care of each other.